Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. And it's a very special story time because it's another episode of Story Beats, where I take one of the story decks as provided by Wizards of the Coast and put it through its paces on Magic Arena. In case you missed it, Wizards has started doing this thing where they publish a bunch of house-made decks for each major set release. We have got 15 of these decks for Wilds of Eldraine, covering all sorts of strategies, and most of them are pretty budget friendly, but that does leave us with the question, are these decks any good? So today we're putting on our expert gamer hat, and we're taking a look at Red Riding Witch Fighting, a red and green deck that features Ruby bravely entering the woods to face Agatha, one of the witches responsible for the enchanted sleep that has gripped the plane of Eldraine. Here is the official description. Alone in the woods? No problem. Ruby's got you covered. Reenact the story of kinship as Ruby saves her Kellen from the evil witch Agatha's cursed control. This deck enjoys making strong creatures enhanced with the abilities of their fallen foes using Agatha's Soul Cauldron and paying for them with Agatha and Ruby's cost reduction and extra mana. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's like a typo in there on the official page. Ruby saves her Kellen. I think it's supposed to be her friend Kellen, maybe? Anyway, that's the game plan. Here's the deck list. The notable cards here are Ruby and Agatha, and also Edgewall Inn, which is an uncommon, non-basic land that can get a creature with an adventure back from your graveyard. Unfortunately, that doesn't really synergize with the rest of the deck because the other arguably more important card here is Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which is going to be exiling things out of your graveyard and adding counters that will share abilities across your remaining creatures. We also have a lot of wolf-flavored cards, which is a key part of the Red Riding Hood story, and that's the fairy tale upon which Ruby is based, so I like how they used that to fill out the rest of the deck. We've also got Agatha's Champion, which is really Ruby's brother Peter in the story. And then we've got some fun witchy cards to kind of represent Agatha's magic, stuff like Witch's Mark or Commune with Nature to really tie the whole theme together. It is important to note, though, that this is an archetype deck first and foremost, which means it is supposed to show off the red and green draft themes more than anything. And here, that is supposed to be having a creature with power 4 or greater at the beginning of combat on your turn. So, do we have enough big bad wolves to devour our opponents, or will Ruby be lost in the wilds forever? Let's find out in today's Story Beats. Okay, here we go. Game 1 with Red Riding Witch Fighting. We've got both of our colors, a 2-drop, and some other stuff to do, so I think we can keep this. Edgewall Inn, I'm not sure if this is better or worse than just Evolving Wilds, but our first turn coming in tapped doesn't really hurt us here. If you haven't seen this one, it's an uncommon land. It enters tapped. When it does so, we choose a color, and then for every following turn, we can tap it for 1 mana of that color. And way down the road, we can pay 3, tap it, and sacrifice it to get an adventure card from our graveyard back to our hand. This deck doesn't have a ton of adventure cards, so I think it's just here to kind of represent the wilds. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to play our Territorial Witch Stalker. So this is one of many wolves in the deck here, something Ruby would definitely face whenever she ventures into the forest around her home. It's a 2-mana 2/3 with Defender. And it has the the set's kind of draft mechanic for red and green, which is, having creatures with power 4 or greater at the start of combat. That'll remove Defender and let this guy attack. So we need to find some way to do that. We could use Witch's Mark to attach a Wicked Roll to it, or we could just throw Agatha out here. We gotta be careful. It's our only copy, and our opponent's on blue-white, so they might have... Okay, they have Resolute Reinforcements. They're putting down some tokens. I am fine with that. I just didn't want her to get countered on the second turn of the game. Third turn, I guess. Alright, so opponent is doing the soldiers thing. Siege veteran coming in here, putting some counters down, but no attacks. Interesting, interesting. Alright, we're going to just keep playing out our lands. And then I like using Witch's Mark here to put a Wicked roll on Agatha. We can probably discard one of these extra lands and hope to draw something better. Alright, so we picked up Commune with Nature, a sorcery that lets us look at the top 5 of our library. We can reveal a creature card from among them and put it into our hand. I think that's worth doing here. We're not doing a whole lot else. We get to grab Agatha's Champion. Perfect. Alright, so we could attack with our 2/2 Agatha. That is not what we want to do with her. So Agatha, if you haven't seen this card, she starts out as a 1/1, and she says, activated abilities of creatures you control cost X less to activate, where X is Agatha's power, but this effect can't reduce that cost to less than 1 mana, which is a ton of words. And then she can pay 4 red-green to give other creatures we control +1/+1 and trample and haste. And that gets reduced by her own power. So our opponent coming in with a 4/4 and a 2/2. We're going to try to block the token here. All right, we get to eat that. And we have another Witch's Mark. Alright, so we also have Witchstalker Frenzy, an instant that deals, excuse me, 5 damage to target creature. I think we want to get, like, the Siege Veteran out of here, or possibly the Valiant Veteran. We could also just fight one of these guys by bargaining our Wicked roll, which I think is fine, because we can just slap another one on Agatha next turn. So we'll knock out their... I mean, we use the term Lord to describe these guys, a creature that gives a buff to other creatures of the same type. We now can attack with our 3/3 Witchstalker, which I think I'm okay with. They might either chump block with this token. I don't think they're going to put the Siege Veteran in front of it. Alright, so that leaves us with a 4/4 and a 1/1. Next turn, we're probably using Witch's Mark, discarding another land, buffing up Agatha again. That's my plan. Opponent may be stuck on 3 lands here if they're hoping to get up to a 4th so they can start putting out more soldiers. This is kind of an interesting matchup. We've got more of the go tall, big, scary wolves versus more of a go wide little soldiers, although their soldiers are getting quite large. So now we have a 5/4 Resolute Reinforcements. I think we're okay trading that off with our champion here. And they get another 1/1 out of it. All right. So we did pick up yet another land. So I think first we're going to use Witch's Mark. All right, so we found Bellowing Bruiser, one of the few cards that does have an adventure on it. We can make up to 2 target creatures unable to block this turn, or we could just play it as a 5-mana 4/4 with haste. And since our opponent's Siege Veteran has Ward 1 on it, we can't yet use Witchstalker Frenzy. So I think we'll just wait. Let them attack into us. That'll make the Witchstalker Frenzy cheaper, and then we'll hopefully be able to punch through Siege Veteran's Ward. Opponent has a ton of cards in hand, still hasn't found that 4th land. Alright, Sky Strike Officer. When it attacks, create a soldier token, tap 3 untapped soldiers you control to draw a card. And opponent triggers at the beginning of combat. They're going to put a counter on their flyer. Sure. Are they going to attack with anybody? They are not, so we don't even get to use our Frenzy here unless we want to pick off Coppercoat Vanguard. Might be worth doing that just to knock the ward off of everybody else. And they do get yet another soldier out of it. And we're just hitting land after land after land. Okay. So I think I just like playing out our big bruiser here. And then we're going to send it in. It doesn't have trample or anything, so they're probably just going to chump block with token, but I want to keep their board as small as possible because anything that gives like all of their soldiers +1 kind of becomes a problem when they've got 4 or 5 of those things laying around. So 16-16. Opponent still apparently has not found their 4th land, but they are using removal on our biggest creature. And what we really need is for them to like attack with this guy and a bunch of stuff. Not by itself. Alright. So we do not have enough to cast Witchstalker Frenzy, so I think we're just going to use our clue instead. Alright, another Witch's Mark. And then another land. Well, I think I definitely want to kill this while we've got the chance, even though it's going to make yet another token, thanks to their Siege Veteran. An opponent can tap a bunch of stuff to draw a card. Still probably looking for a 4th land. And I guess this time we're going to stick the roll on our Witch Stalker, discarding another land. Pick up 2 more. Alright. Still not going to risk Agatha here in combat. I doubt they're blocking with that veteran, but I'd rather keep her to hold off some of these 1/1s. Opponent did find a 4th land, but it's blue, so they don't have double white, which means they still can't exile their Valiant Veteran. We don't have to worry about our Wandering Emperor. Okay, so they just pick off our Wolf. Alright, down to 9. So we're holding Feral Encounter, a sorcery that has Ruby in the art. That's why it's in this deck. It says, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may exile a creature from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the card exiled this turn. At the beginning of your next combat phase on this turn, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power. So it's like a one-sided fight. So I think that's worth doing. And we don't find a single creature among those 5 cards. Outstanding. Well, I guess we'll crack our clue. We find a ruby, so we can do the Witch Stalker and ruby. And I guess we're just picking off one of these tokens. I really wanted to get something with 3 or more so that we could kill the Siege Veteran. Alright, so we are kind of flooding out here. We haven't really hit any of our useful stuff. Agatha's Cauldron would be great. Unfortunately, I think we just put that on the bottom of our deck. Yet another land. Okay. So we could give everybody +1/+1. That's not really gonna do it. We could go get somebody with an adventure back. That would just be our Bellowing Bruiser, but I guess that's better than doing nothing. But we still can't even attack with that into Myrel, so we're not doing anything. We are the aggressive red and green deck, and we are on defense. Feels great. Feels great. Opponent continuing to drop tokens for days. How can they be beating me? Don't they see my expert gamer hat? Otawara to bounce our Bellowing Bruiser. Again, Ruby in the art. A lot of great flavor choices in this deck. Kind of making the whole game plan suffer, though, you know. All right, they're coming in with a 5/6, and at best we can put together 5 power. So not great. I don't really want to drop to 4, so I guess we're giving up Ruby. Yeah, I don't think this is gonna quite get us across the line, but at least we've got 2 creatures. Yeah, so Boundary Lands Ranger is a 2/2 for 2, and at the beginning of combat on our turn, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, we can discard a card to draw a new card, but we're not able to do that because we wanted to play both of the cards that we had in our hand. So, all right, opponent finally finds time to exile their veteran there, which is going to buff up their entire team, and this is probably going to be a lethal attack. I mean, even if we jump block, we're still taking like 20 damage. Oh, no. All right, Red Ruby didn't quite get us there. Red Riding Witch Fighting failed to defeat the witches in the wilds. Let's see if we can get it together for game 2. Okay, here we go. Game 2 with Red Riding Witch Fighting. I have ditched the expert hat. I didn't feel like I deserved it after that first game. It was mostly on there to protect you all from the glare coming off my bald head. We've got 3 forests and a bunch of red cards. I don't think we can keep this, unfortunately. This is much better. We'll keep it. But I think we're going to ditch one of these forests. All right. So we've got our Witch Stalker into Agatha's Vile Cauldron, probably. And this is good. I like our matchup because our opponent has Tasha Avatar, and she's actually a witch. So we should be well positioned to defeat her. I mean, that's the whole point of this deck. All right, opponent with blue and black up. So I don't know if that's counter magic or something they want to flash in on the end step. I think there's some fairies that have flash. We can't attack with our Witch Stalker. And I don't think I want to risk dropping my only cauldron into open blue mana. So we're just going to pass the turn. All right, they did have the flash fairy Mastermind. Good choice, good choice. Opponent follows that up with a tapped Waterfront District. And Ego Drain. Outstanding. So they're going to take away probably the Cauldron. Unless they're confident in their removal for champion. Okay, so we have lost our Cauldron. In hindsight, I guess we were supposed to play it last turn. So we have Feral Encounter now, which lets us look at 5, put 1 into our hand. And for the second time, no creature. We draw nothing off of Feral Encounter. But we do get to hopefully smite this fairy before it grows any bigger. Okay. So that was just a very expensive conditional fight spell that did not replace itself with a live creature, but not a problem. Not a problem. Our opponent, 5 cards in hand. We have 2, and they know what both of them are. Ooh, okay. We did have to mulligan this time, to be fair. We were starting on 6, and this deck doesn't really have ways to draw more cards. And there go our last 2. And we pick up Witch's Mark, which lets us discard a card to draw 2 more. So we're going to hold on to that. I guess that's one of the ways we have to refill our hand. Not really, because we have to play it and discard 1 to draw 2, so it's card neutral. Alright, Dream Spoilers and a Dream Thief. So nice little blue-black fairies going on over here. And we pick up a land, so we're definitely going to pitch that, try to find something better. Okay, so we got a Frenzy. We can hold on to that. If they start to attack with a bunch of fairies, this actually lines up pretty good. And they do. They come in with both. So I think we're going to try to knock out the Dream Spoilers while we can. Make our opponent decide if they want to protect that somehow. Nope, they let it go. All right. So we just take 1, and now we're going to draw another land. It's probably going to be Edgewall Inn, if I had to guess. Commune with Nature, which is going to look at the top 5 of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them, put it into your hand. Okay, well, I guess that's worth firing off here. Bruiser's pretty big. We would have the mana for it next turn, or we can double up Witch Stalkers. I think we want the Bruiser, because it'll have haste. Seems alright. Although our opponent knows it's coming, so they can just keep removal or counter magic ready for it. If this sticks, though, it'll have 4 power, which will let our Witch Stalker also be able to attack. This guy doing absolutely nothing against the flying fairies here. We're getting run right over by them. Another land. Well, might be insurance against a... No, it's not even going to stop a spell stutter because they've got so many fairies. Okay, well, it got to resolve. And now we get to attack for kind of a lot. They could chump block or they could bounce somebody. Okay. So opponent used Obira's Attendants, the Desperate Parry adventure there, to shrink our Bellowing Bruiser for a turn. And now they're going to freeze it in place. Alright, so our Bruiser is not going to untap for like a week and a half. And we're just going to get pecked by these fairies. Flooding out. We're going to keep that in hand in case we draw another Witch's Mark and we can maybe discard it. We do still get our trigger on the Territorial Witch Stalker, though. It just cares about having a creature with power 4 or greater. It doesn't have to be untapped or anything, so we just trade that off for a very expensive Stingblade Assassin. I'm cool with that. The opponent's got 1 card in hand. They've got a Fairy Dream Thief in the graveyard that they can exile to draw a new card, and they've got the Attendants, which are 3/4. Okay. Do we try to... I think we just kill that right now before they can counter it. All right. Well, we're still not in great shape, but we're also not in terrible shape. Opponent decides to cash in their Fairy Dream Thief out of the bin, pick up a card at the cost of a life. Okay. Alright, well, we got Ruby. And so, again, at the start of combat, I think she's gonna get her buff, because we do still control a power 4 or greater creature, which elevates Ruby all the way up to a 3/4. Okay, the race is on. Next turn, we get our Bruiser back. And we're potentially throwing 7 damage at our opponent. They've got to come up with some answers, or at least blockers here. And they decide to use Fairy Fencing to pick off our 4/4, finally. And then they play Talion, the Kindly Lord, naming 4. So Talion, when it enters the battlefield, choose a number between 1 and 10. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value, power, or toughness, so they know we're on power 4, we lose a life and they draw a card. Well, we're gonna, I guess, Brave the Wilds here, which doesn't do anything for us except get a land out of our deck. Not that we are hurting for those. And Ruby alone does not help us here, so we're taking 5 in the air. We're on like a 2-turn clock. And of course we hit yet another land. Okay, so fairies were able to defeat Ruby. I think we're gonna take one more shot with this deck and see if we can defeat Agatha and, you know, break the curse once and for all. Let's find out. Okay, one more time with Red Riding Witch fighting, this time hat backwards. I think that might do it. We technically have all of our colors because we can play Edgewall in for green. We won't get to do a feral encounter for a little while, but we can Brave the Wilds or drop the Witch Stalker, so I'd rather keep this than mulligan down to 6 again. And we did find another forest. Alright, so I'm going to set the inn on green. And then I think turn 2 might be the Witch Stalker. Depends how aggressive our opponent is here. Not very. But we've got 2 of these guys now, so I might as well put one of them down. And the next turn might be Brave the Wilds and another Witch Stalker, or Ruby. Interesting. Well, let's try that. Ruby at least has haste, so she can get in here. And so Brave the Wilds has a bargain mode where it turns a land into a 3/3, but we're not really interested in doing that. I just want to keep getting lands and thin out the deck a little bit and afford, you know, our Witch Stalker or Feral Encounter and then play something. Opponent finally develops their board with a Yotian Tactician, a 4-mana 3/4 that buffs up other soldiers. Very interesting. I think we're just gonna kill that right now while they're tapped out. And then attack for 1 with Ruby. Oh man, she's great. I like how she has a crossbow in the art, but doesn't have reach. Usually archers in Magic have reach. Alright, opponent with Sarah Redeemer, 5 mana, 2/4, flying Angel Soldier. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, put 2 1/1 counters on it. Jeez. Okay. So we have a Hollow Scavenger, which can make food, and it becomes a 3/2 wolf that can then eat food to get bigger. We could... Man, Feral Encounter's risky. I guess we're just doing Witch Stalker. And I think we're going to want the food off of this guy. And we might as well actually play him since we're not attacking with Ruby here. Alright, so normally against white I would be worried about like a board wipe card, but since they seem to be on like a go wide soldiers plan themselves, I don't expect to encounter anything quite like that here, but you never know. Alright, so opponent played an Undercover Operative, which came in as a copy of the Sarah Redeemer, got the counters off of the trigger from that, and they are using Runic Shot to get rid of Ruby of all things. Curious. Alright, so a 4/6 with a shield counter is going to be a problem. I guess this is where we use Feral Encounter. Find a brute that we won't be able to cast. Oh no. Well, I guess that's still worth going and getting. I think we're gonna eat this food. And then make it so they can't block. Why not? So because the Scavenger is big enough, he's gonna make our Witch Stalkers active, and we get to punch in for quite a bit of damage here, but this trick really only works once. Next turn we can play the Bruiser, which will let us swing in again. Okay. Interesting opponent used that there, although I guess that since it's a sorcery, they can't like use it after we attack with the Bruiser, so might as well. Unfortunately here, even if we drop this 4/4 with haste, it's going to turn these into 3/3s that can attack. Opponent just uses their 4/6 to eat our 4/4. We get in for 6 and leave them at 1, and then have no way to make another attack. So not ideal. But opponent is spending a long time scrying, looking for a way out of this, so maybe that last card in their hand isn't really going to help them. Well, they keep both on top. That's not a great sign. Okay, but opponent goes with an attack. Curious. So I guess we try to do the Bruiser, and we find out if they've got a counterspell. They sure do. Okay. Alright, well, Commune. Guess we grab another Bruiser. And they have Myrel, which is going to start making tokens, which are going to be able to jump block everybody. Well. Okay, so if we attack with everyone here, they could either give up Myrel and... Oop, okay. I'm happy to get her off the board. They still fall to 1. And now they've got 1 card, and we have a decent-looking board. I think the backwards hat might have been the lucky charm we needed here. They can have all that. That's fine. I think we still have lethal, because when this goes to combat, these are all going to become 3/3s that all get to attack. And they are not going to have enough blockers. Did Red Riding Witch Fighting just get there? Did we do it? Did we get a win? Block, block, bing, bing. There we go, -5. We did it. Red Riding actually won a game. Cool, let's take one last look at the deck and talk about potential upgrades and give our final verdict here. All right, so Red Riding Witch Fighting. We ended up 1-2. Not great, but not terrible for being a budget deck that is mostly just like a really well-polished draft deck. If you have a lot of these cards already in your collection, either from doing a pre-release or a draft or just kind of whatever, this is not a terrible starting point. There are obviously some upgrades that we could make. I always recommend starting with the lands. I don't think these 2 copies of Edgewall Inn really need to be in here. They look nice. And occasionally you can trade it in for another adventure card out of your bin, but realistically, you're going to want stuff like Rockfall Vale, Carplusian Forest, Copperline Gorge, plenty of dual lands in Standard right now that are affordable. I mean, they're going to cost you rare wild cards here at the most. But having the mana on curve to play your aggressive game plan is pretty important, so maybe consider upgrading some of these lands with some of those lands. Beyond that, we want to hit 4 power pretty consistently. I mean, an ideal curve would be to play a turn 2 Territorial Witchstalker, and then on turn 3 you play something with 4 power, right? Because then you can start attacking with your 3/3 Witchstalker. So just within Wilds of Eldraine, you've actually got 2 ways to do that. Verdant Outrider is a 4/2 that costs 3 mana, and he even has an activated ability that'll work with Agatha, or, you know, with her Cauldron if you want to go that route. Or you've got Minecart Daredevil, which gives you another adventure that you can use to increase somebody's power, which might trigger other 4 or greater power requirements. Or he's a 4/2 for 3 mana as well. So they're both Eldraine cards. They don't probably show up in the wilds with Ruby. They're not really story fits, although I guess you could make a case for the Verdant Outrider. He could be a knight that she encounters on some adventure someday. Another fun card you might find room for in here, Picnic Ruiner. It covers both of our colors. It can distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. That works great with the Cauldron. Works great with Agatha. Buffs up our team. Can maybe, again, get somebody to that crucial 4 power. And he uses the same trigger as a lot of other stuff in the deck. It's a 2 mana 2/2. When it attacks, while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, it gets double strike. I think I like that even better than the Boundary Lands Ranger, which is a 2 mana 2/2 as well. But it's kind of vanilla in most cases unless we've got that 4 power going for us. Whereas the Picnic Ruiner at least adds an adventure that might help us. And, you know, if you put counters on him somehow or buff him up with something and give him double strike, that can hit really, really hard. You probably don't need 3 copies of Agatha's Champion. Bellowing Bruiser, I mean, did work for us. I mean, I guess these are really our only hard 4 power creatures, so maybe you want to keep some of those Frenzy being removal, I mean, this I usually recommend cutting or replacing. Even just generic lightning strikes are much cheaper and deal damage to any target. You can hit planeswalkers, players, whatever. So these are really situational. Again, I like the art and the flavor behind it, but if we're trying to take this deck to a truly competitive place, you're probably going to have to make some concessions for flavor versus functionality. So Witchstalker Frenzy could probably go. Hollow Scavenger, I mean, doesn't really do much for us other than look great. It's another wolf, but there are easier ways to get 4 power rather than making food and then eating it and spending more mana on it. The Cauldron and Agatha are very strong cards. If you've got the budget for it, I would go up to 2 or 3 copies of each of these, but they are mythic, so I understand that that might be a limitation. Soul Cauldron, also one of the most expensive, paper cards right now, so I'm aware of that. But keep your rubies. Feral Encounter was really hit or miss, almost always a miss for me. So you probably don't need any of these. There are better ways to fill your hand up with cards. But if you've got one in your collection anyway, I mean, you can keep it. It's, again, cool art. Anytime Ruby shows up doing heroic stuff, I'm a fan. The Witchstalkers, they helped us win that last game. I mean, they're very efficient cost to power wise. You just got to be able to trigger them reliably so that you can attack rather than defend. And then you get the fun stuff like Witch's Mark, Brave the Wilds, Commune with Nature, Leaping Ambush. These are all seasoned to taste. If you like combat tricks, keep them. If you like deck thinning and filtering, that's fine. Pull your lands out, pull your creatures out. But I would probably condense these into a package of something that is more effective and doesn't take up a whole bunch of different slots. Witch's Mark is good. There's a bunch of red cards right now in Standard that let you exile the top 2 of your deck and play any number of them until the end of the turn or end of next turn or something like that. So those might be a better fit just for general efficiency, but again, you got to balance flavor, fun, functionality, whatever you got on hand. So if you like having a Ruby and Agatha in the art as much as possible, keep these cards. Otherwise, plenty of options there for upgrades and improvements. Oh, Beanstalk Worm, another pretty easy way to get above 4 power. Being able to play extra lands early as an adventure also could work for you. But yeah, I like Picnic Ruiner here. I like the Daredevil. I like the Outrider. And I definitely like upgrading the lands. If you do that, this could become a pretty playable deck, especially if you find room in your budget for more Cauldrons and Agathas, but that's probably true for a lot of decks. What did you think of it, though, in terms of capturing the story? I mean, Ruby, we see her with Kellen all the time. She's never really on her own. She doesn't really fight Agatha directly. That's mostly Kellen, so I'm not sure why they tried to tell us that she's rescuing him or whatever in that little story blurb. So in terms of capturing the story, this one doesn't really do it for me, but I like how it shows the green-red draft archetype. I mean, you definitely would want to pick up some copies of Ruby and some of these other cards that work well with that power 4 or greater trigger. So I'm pretty happy with it overall. I don't really rank these or give them scores or anything, but this one tends to lean heavier into a flavor that doesn't really exist. It's mostly just Ruby and Agatha and wolves and witches in the wilds, which is a mouthful. But again, what did you think? Let me know down in the comments. And then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.